Amid Beis, that's 130b. And we're going to start, it's about 12 lines from the top. The line starts with the word Lekelim. We'll start from the words Baimine. Baimine Reb Zera Merabasi. Reb Zera asked Rabbi a question. I assume it's in Eretz Yisrael. They were both from Bavel, I believe, but they moved to Eretz Yisrael. Mavish le'nishtatva b'mal taltal b'kulei. Okay, let me just introduce this, just to understand what the question is. If someone has a courtyard that he shares with other houses, so minatayra, biblically, that's a private domain. But because there's other people that use it other than his own family, so it's similar to a public domain. He's not allowed to carry from his house to the courtyard. Now, in the courtyard itself, let's say there's furniture there, he's allowed to move it from one place in the courtyard. But from his own house to the courtyard, that he can't do. So it really depends on when Shabbos comes in, where the item is. There's items that need to remain in the house, and there's items that would remain in the courtyard. You can't bring them into the house. But in each location, they could be moved around. In the house, they could be moved around, of course, and in the courtyard, they could also be moved. Now, he has a solution of making an Erev. Even though there's other people that live in this complex and they share the same courtyard, they can each contribute food, and it's as if they become one family. It's as if there's only one family live there, managed like a bunch of cousins. And that courtyard really belongs to all of them, and it's really all one private domain, like one house with one courtyard. The whole thing just becomes like one house. That's what the Erev does. It's a meal. It's usually like a box of matzah, and that joins the whole courtyard. They can carry from the house to the courtyard and from the courtyard to the house, even items that were. Okay, then the courtyards are surrounding an alleyway. So it'd be, like a cul-de-sac, a dead end, they can call it here. So there's houses and courtyards, and the courtyards are surrounding the alleyway. Now, the alleyway has the same issue that the courtyard had to the houses. Here I have a public area that biblically it's a private domain. It's not a public street, but all these courtyards use it. So there's something called shituf. Shituf is very similar to an Erev. An Erev is what joins a courtyard to the house. Shituf is what joins courtyards to courtyards through the alleyway. In other words, it joins the alleyway to the courtyards. That's what it does. That's shituf. So what happens if there's an alleyway that they didn't do shituf? They didn't join all the courtyards. Now, in a courtyard itself, remember, if you didn't make an Erev, you're allowed to carry items in the courtyard around the courtyard. What about if you didn't do shituf? Are you allowed to carry items around the alleyway? Not to take it into a courtyard, but just in the alleyway itself. Can you carry it from one end to the other? That's Reb Zera is asking Rabbi. So he asks him, do we say it's like a courtyard? Just like a courtyard, even though you didn't make an Erev in the courtyard, a bunch of houses in this one courtyard, but they didn't join together. So the halacha is mutal taltal b'kulei. They can still carry in the courtyard, not to take it into a house, or not to take out of the house into the courtyard, but in the courtyard itself they can carry. So hainami. So here also, afagav le'nishtatva mutal taltal b'kulei. You should be allowed to carry in the whole mavai, in the whole alleyway. Not to take it into a courtyard, of course, but around the alleyway. Or maybe you can't compare it to a courtyard. Why? Two options. The chatzar is leidal in mechitzas, heiles leidal in mechitzas. A courtyard has 4 walls. An alleyway has 3 walls. one end of the alleyway is totally open to the street. The other end is the cul-de-sac, is the dead end. So in a courtyard, if there's no Erev, you can carry all around the courtyard, but it doesn't mean you can carry all around the Mavai if there's no Shituf. It's open on one side. You can't compare it. Inami, another option is Chatzar Sleidyurin, Hilas Sleidyurin. People live in the courtyard. That's more of a private area. Well, in the houses in the courtyard. It has a house there. But a Mavai doesn't even have a house in it. Maybe you can't carry there at all. Because maybe it's as if you're in a street, rabbinically. And just like we don't say that you can carry from one end of the street to the other end of the street, you only have 4 amas. That's what we would say about a Mavai. You only have 4 amas. So we have 2 options how to view this. Do you view it like a courtyard without an Erev, or do you view it like a street? Okay. So Shasik v'le'em lev le'midi. Gives him he's silent. He doesn't answer at all. We're talking about Rabasi. Reb Zeir asked Rabasi the question. He's quiet. One time Reb Zeir found Rabasi was sitting and he was saying over the following. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, he said the name of Rish Lakish. They're in Eretz Yisrael. Rish Lakish is in Eretz Yisrael. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. I don't know if Rish Lakish was actually by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. He was by Rabbi Yochanan. And although we had once, Rish Lakish tells Rabbi Yochanan, who's this Rav that everyone's talking about? And Rabbi Yochanan responds, don't you remember? He was by Rabbi, he was by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. That doesn't necessarily mean that Rish Lakish was there and he was supposed to have remembered that. So anyway, he says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. This is Rish Lakish. There was one time that they forgot to bring the knife, the scalpel, the ismal, from to where the baby was, for the bris, and it was on Shabbos. They didn't bring it on Friday. They brought it on Shabbos. Now, that's a machlekes in our Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer holds you're allowed to bring it on Shabbos, and the Chacham said you're not allowed to. This was a matter that was difficult to the sages. They're ignoring the opinion of the majority, the sages, and they're passing like Rabbi Eliezer. They carried a knife through the streets. Chada de Rabbi Eliezer Shamutihi. First of all, Rabbi Eliezer Shamuti. Now, 2 opinions here. Either it was put in Cherem. Shamta is another word for Cherem. I mean, Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated because he refused to accept the opinion of the sages in that Gemara Bava Metzia, when they had a conflict over a type of oven, if it becomes impure. And at that point, they didn't want the community to be divided, that it looks like there's 2 traditions or 2 Torahs. So they had to establish that the opinion is like the sages, and Rabbi Eliezer would not give in, so they excommunicated him. And so here we had this at the beginning of Nida. We quoted that Rabbi Eliezer. There's only 4 halachas that follow Rabbi Eliezer. So here, how are they going like Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated. The Yerushalmi learns that Shamuti means that he was a student of Beis Shammai. Shamuti is like he was a Shamayan, and we don't go like Beis Shammai. The same, whatever it is, it's the same issue. Why are they passing like Rabbi Eliezer and carrying a knife through the streets? And even if not, even if he was accepted and he was a Talmud of Beis Hillel and he wasn't in Cherem, but he's still an individual, and the majority opinion wins. Rabbi Ishia explained, Shilas is Rabbi Yehuda Geiser. I asked Rabbi Yehuda Geiser. Geiser means he was a mile. Geiser means to cut. He was a mile. And V'amarli, he explained, Mavish le'nishtatva b'yhavit. It was actually a mavai that didn't have an Erev. It's not that they carried it through the streets. They carried it in a Mavai. And the Mavai was not joined together. Mavai is the alleyway. It wasn't joined together by all the courtyards. So it had this rabbinic issue of carrying, and it's considered a public area rabbinically. By Sumi, and they brought it from one end of the Mavai to the other end of the Mavai, one end of the alleyway to the other end of the alleyway. So apparently, you're allowed to carry around the Mavai items that were in the Mavai from one end to the other, even without a shituf. And this is Rabbi saying this over. And it was exactly Reb Zera's question. So Amalei, Sfirle Lamar, Mavishlein Shtatva, Mutl Tatabakula. Reb Zera says, is that what you hold? Amalei, he says, yeah, I hold you're allowed to carry from one end of the Mavai to the other. I asked you this. This was exactly my question. You were quiet. It says, Dilma agav shitfach, rotlach gamrach. Maybe because of your learning, your chazara, you got it back. You got back this teaching. Amalayin agav shitfa rotli gamri. Because of my learning, my chazara, my going through it, this teaching tradition came back to me. That's one interpretation there. Other interpretation is maybe because you learned so fast or something, you forgot it. He says, yeah, because I learned so fast, I forgot it. And now I remembered it. But before I didn't have it. There's different ways of reading that. Now, there's a very strange Rashi. Rashi Vaisumi Hayresh, it's towards the bottom of the thin lines. Rashi says, Shayatinik bebayas shebreisha mavi, bismul bebayas shebreisha acher shekenegdai. Talking about carrying around the mavi. Rashi says the child's in the house on one end, and the knife is in the house on the other end. Now, that's a huge problem. No one's suggested ever in this Gemara that you're carrying out of a house into a mavi. The whole discussion here is you have items in the mavi itself that you're carrying around the mavi. It's a big problem, this Rashi. The commentaries are discussing what's going on here. Rashi's adding in that one word, those two words, that really mess up the whole understanding of this Gemara. Okay. Itmar, we have a statement slightly different than what we just learned. We just learned that if there's an alleyway that has courtyards all around it, although you can't carry from the courtyards to the alleyway, but in the alleyway itself, you can carry from one end to the other. So this would be good for the kids that play soccer or something. They could play if they're allowed to play ball on Shabbos. But they have a nice open area. The streets probably no cars, and they can carry this ball around throughout the alleyway, even though there was no shituf, even though the courtyards didn't join anything together. The next statement doesn't really fit like that, as you'll see. The statement says, Amar Reb Zera Amar Rav. Reb Zera says in the name of Rav. See, Reb Zera was in Bavel before he moved to Eretz Yisrael. The last conversation was in Eretz Yisrael. He says over in the name of Rav from Bavel, from Babylonia, it's like a street. If there's no shituf, which that's the term for an erev in an alleyway, it's called shituf. Shituf means like partnership. Erev also means like partnership. He says you're only allowed to carry in an alleyway without having been joined all the courtyards together with some sort of food, so that you're only allowed to carry in there 4 cubits. It's like you're in the middle of the street, and on Shabbos you can't carry in the street. No, it's not a street, it's only rabbinic, but nevertheless, that's what it's like, rabbinically. Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Hamilsa Amar Reb Zera v'li Pirsha. Reb Zera said this, but he did not explain it. And what is there to explain? There was no shituf. It's exactly what it is. It's an alleyway without, in the courtyards didn't join. But Rabbi Baravua came and he explained it. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Baravu, Amar Rav. Rav Nachman said in the name of his father-in-law, Rabbi Baravu, who said in the name of Rav, an alleyway that they didn't do shituf. That means they didn't make this eruv to join all the courtyards together. Now listen to the two options. Irvu chatzeres and batim. You see, there's two things that are going on here. You have courtyards that contain houses surrounding the alleyway. Now, can you carry from the house to the courtyard? So if there's an eruv, then yes. Can you carry from the courtyards into the alleyway? Then you need shituf. So we know there's no shituf. But let's go back and discuss what's going on in the houses. Can you carry from the houses? So if irvu chatzeres and batim, if the houses had an eruv, that means that they can carry from houses into the courtyard, and the whole courtyard is considered one domain. Ein metalton bayel dalet amas. Then in the mava you can only carry in four cubits. Why that is, that we need to wait. The Gemara is going to go through possibilities, but in other words, things get worse for the alleyway when things get better for the courtyard. Lo yervu chatzeres and batim. If there's no eruv in the courtyards, so mutal taltal bekulei, then you can carry in the whole mavi from one end to the other. The Gemara will answer it. Let's leave the suspense. The Gemara will explain why this is. Okay. Amle Rab Chanina Chuzah l'Rabba. Chuzah says to Rabbi, Ma'ishna ki yerva chatzeres in batim. What's the difference? If the courtyards are joined together with the houses, that means the houses in the courtyards are joined. That means that you have a bunch of residents in this little complex, let's say they're townhouses, in a courtyard. And they join together, everyone there, that they put food together. It's one happy family. And they can carry in it. What's the difference? What are you doing? You're removing the courtyards and you're turning the entire courtyard into a house. This whole courtyard, even though there's different families there, because they made an eruv, it becomes one big family. And it becomes all like one house. And you can carry it from the house to the courtyard and the courtyard to, it's all one house. That's what happens when there's an eruv. And Rav l'tamei, and Rav follows his teaching. We went up to 131. Rav says that when can you carry in a mavi? And his expression of this is that at the open end of the mavi, open end of the alleyway, you need to put up a post as a reminder that that's the end of the alleyway. Otherwise, people that are carrying in the alleyway will walk straight into the street. Now, the street is going right by the top of the alleyway. So you have to put a post there. Now, there's two types of posts. One is vertical, lechi, or you can put a kaira horizontal straight across. Now, that would look more like an eruv, the horizontal one. It's a beam across the top. He says, when does that work? That you put a beam there. This is not negating. This has nothing to do with the food. You need the food as well to join everyone together, but you also need that string or that, it's not a string, it's a post or a beam. When does that work? That you can join it together? That's only if you have courtyards and houses that are open to the courtyard. Now, over here, it's a little bit of an issue because you didn't join the alleyway together with the courtyards because you didn't do a shituf. And you don't really have courtyards either because all the courtyards turned into houses. Why? Because the houses all joined together with the courtyards. They all became like halachically a house. What does this mean? That you can carry from the houses to the courtyards without any reservations. You just carry in and out. There's no restrictions there. But you can't carry from the courtyards, house courtyards, into the alleyway. So it's a clear mark there. And so therefore, that alleyway is not considered a Rishus HaYachid. It doesn't have the qualifications. It doesn't have courtyards. He says, V'hacha, and here, Batimika Chatzeres Leka. Here you have houses, but you don't have courtyards. Why? Because all the courtyards turned into houses. So the Gemara says, but he continues to ask. This is Rabbi Chanina Chuzah is asking Rabbi. So if that's the case, that you don't have courtyards, because they all turned into houses because you made an Erev, so what's the other option? What's the other case? You didn't make an Erev. You didn't make an Erev in the houses to the courtyards, and you didn't make a Shituf to the Maveh. And over there we said you can carry in the Maveh. It says, Kila Yervunami. Even if you didn't make an Erev, Lechzina Lahani Batim Kamandasti Medami. Rav says in order for the alleyway to turn into a private domain, you need to have courtyards and houses. If you made a Erev in the courtyards, then you don't have courtyards because they turned into houses. If you didn't make an Erev in the courtyards, then you don't have houses. Why don't you have houses? You have houses. But you can't carry from the house to the courtyard. So it's as if those houses are blocked. So all you have now is courtyards. So v'chatzer sekabatim leka. Courtyards you have, houses you don't have, because you can't carry from the houses to the courtyard. So there's no extension there. So therefore, what's the difference between the two? You should not be allowed to carry in the alleyway. The Gemara says, 1 second. This is Rabbi answering to Rabbi Chanina Chuzah. Okay. I'll introduce this and we'll go back and we'll explain what's happening. If there's a bunch of houses in a courtyard, so in the courtyard itself, we said you can carry, but we said we couldn't carry from the houses to the courtyard unless there's an Erev. An Erev means that they join together with one meal of food and it becomes one family. The food makes it into one family, and then you can carry from houses to the courtyard. In the courtyard itself, you can carry. Now, let's say they forgot to make an Erev. So all of those houses have rights to the courtyard. And that's the problem. Because all of those houses have rights to the courtyard, that courtyard is considered a public area. Rabbinically, it's considered a public area. So therefore, you can't carry from the houses to the courtyard because the courtyard is owned by everyone and everyone has rights to it. So, and they didn't join together to make all the houses into one and the whole courtyard into one house. They didn't do that. So because they forgot. So there is a solution. If, let's say there's 5 people in the courtyard, 5 families, 5, let's say townhouses or whatever, houses. 4 of them tell one of them, look, we're giving up our share of the courtyard to you. So then this one person is the one that really has the whole courtyard. So if they just become guests in his courtyard. So we give up our rights, and they do that on Shabbos. It's called mevatel. They're mevatel their rights to the courtyard. Then this person can carry from his house to the courtyard. They can't carry from their houses, but he can carry from his house to the courtyard. So then it becomes one house with a courtyard. Okay, that's an option. So what's happening over here is that we have 2 stories. And we're talking about the alleyway. And we said that there's a difference if there's an Erev in the courtyard or not. If there's an Erev, then it makes things worse for the alleyway. And if there's no Erev, then you can, in the courtyards, that means you can't carry from the houses to the alleyways. But in the alleyway itself, you can't carry from the houses to the courtyards. But in the alleyway itself, you can carry. So we were asking, what's the difference? So we said that if there's no Erev, then I have courtyards, and I have houses. And Rav would accept that. And if there is an Erev, then the whole courtyard turned into a house, but you still can't carry it to the alleyway. So I don't have courtyards here. I just have houses and alleyways, and Rav doesn't accept that. So he's asking like this. Let's say there's no Erev. So then you don't really have houses because you can't carry from houses to the courtyard. So those houses don't exist. It's as if they're blocked off. So Rabbi responds to that. We're looking for houses, courtyards, and alleyways for this to work. Rabbi responds, it's not true that there's no houses. There are houses. There is a house. Why? Because everyone in the courtyard can nullify their rights to the courtyard to this one person. They can forfeit their rights. And then I can have a house going to a courtyard because everyone's allowed to carry. This person can carry, or items from this one house can carry into that public courtyard because it's not a public courtyard anymore. It's a private courtyard. There's other people there because they're guests, but it's still one house for this courtyard. Those other houses don't have rights to it, so you can carry in. So you just responded that in this instance, I have a house, I have a courtyard, and I have an alleyway, and that's why I'm allowed to use that alleyway, the whole thing. The Gemara says, no, that's not a good answer because seif bayasika batim laka. How many houses do you have? Rav said, in order for an alleyway to become permissible, you need to have houses and courtyards. Here you only have one house because everyone forfeited their rights to the courtyard in order for this to work. They didn't make an Erev. So the Gemara answers, well, efshad the mitzafer vad palga the yom l'gabi chad, v'palga the yom l'panya l'gabi chad. Maybe they each forfeit their rights to the courtyard. They divide it up. You get the morning and someone else gets the afternoon. So they have two houses in this courtyard. So Gemara doesn't accept that. Why? Safe, idna disa lahai, less lahai. But in the morning you have one, in the afternoon you have one. You don't have two. You never have two. So that's not a good answer. Ella Amar Ravashi, let's go back. Ravashi says a different answer. Migaram lechatzer sheyasru. Who causes that these courtyards should need a shituf? They need to join. It's only because there are houses in there. It's batim. So if the batim are actually in the courtyard, because you made an Erev, then you have a problem. If there's no houses in those courtyards, then the courtyard and the alleyway just become one. You can't carry from the courtyard to the alleyway. But what he's saying over here, this would work like this. Why does it get worse when the courtyards get better? The alleyway gets worse when the courtyards get better. Is because items from the houses are allowed to be carried into the courtyard. Then I have a concern that those items are going to end up in the alleyway. So it's from houses to alleyway because the items are in the courtyard. It could be brought to the courtyard. But if there's no Erev, then items from the house can't be brought to the courtyard. So therefore, the alleyway is more protected. There's no buffer zone. It's like there is a buffer zone that the alleyway, the courtyards have no items from the houses in them to have a concern that maybe in the alleyway there's going to be house items that are going to be carried around in that domain because the houses are blocked off because there was no Erev. This is following the opinion of Reb Shimon. Rav learns like Reb Shimon that we learned yesterday, that he holds you can carry from courtyards to roofs to other areas to open areas. You just can't carry from houses into them. If you follow that opinion, then as long as I don't have household items in any of those areas, then I can carry amongst in those areas. Okay. we didn't really discuss carrying from the courtyard into the alleyway as well. But that's what's coming out, that you would be allowed to carry from the courtyard to the alleyway as long as the houses are blocked. That's what would come out according to this. Okay, now we have a new Gemara, easier. Less complications, rather simple. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was a major student of Rabbi Yechanan. Every 30 days he reviewed everything together with Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan corrected it. Leila kol amar Rabbi Eliezer machshir mitzvah deichenes Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion was that preparations for mitzvah push off Shabbos. And the example that we had in this parak was that you're allowed to prepare a knife by making fire, to heat up the metal, to make a knife so that you should be able to do a bris. You're allowed to carry the knife through the Rosh Hashanah to perform a bris on Shabbos. Even the preparations for the bris, not just the bris itself, but preparations push off Shabbos. Comes along Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yechanan and says, it's not any mitzvah that this applies to. It's specifically the ones that he said it by. Sharei shtei alechem, because on Shavuos, there's the new sacrifice that's brought from the wheat. It's called shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread. The first time that a wheat offering is brought that year. Already the omer was brought from barley earlier in the year. But the first wheat offering was the shtei alechem. And that's a chayvas hayom. It has to be brought on Shavuos. And Rabbi Eliezer said, how do you know that you're allowed to cut the wheat and do all of that? To make the preparations for that wheat offering? I learned it from Gzer Shava. Now, Gzer Shava means that I compare words from this portion to words of another portion and make that analogy, that comparison. And that teaches me that I'm allowed to violate the Shabbos or Yom Tov in order for this to be performed. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer, really, I shouldn't have to do that. I should just say that it's permissible automatically. Preparations are permissible. I see by the bris. So no, it's only if I have a special limit. It wasn't a statement that applies to everything. It has to have a special limit, a special teaching. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, how do you know that preparations for the shtei alechem, for this offering that's brought on Shavuos, the 2 loaves of bread, that pushes off the Shabbos? Nemra hava ba'omer, it says that you bring the omer, which is 49 days earlier. On the second day of Pesach, you bring the barley offering, nemra hava b'shtei alechem, and it says that you bring the shtei alechem. Now we're looking at the word hava. That's the analogy here. We're looking at that word. Just like hava by the omer. It says that the preparations, that means the cutting of the barley and the grinding of the flour, all of that. Was the barley ground? Yeah, I think so. And it was sifted. All of those preparations violate the Shabbos, they're done on Shabbos. So, okay, so I have a special limud that the Torah teaches me clearly that those preparations push off the Shabbos, even though they're from the 39 prohibited labors. Gemara says, mufni. This would need to be open. Now, what that means is that when I have a Gzer Shava, when I have 2 words that are comparing one to the other, the only time that I can do that comparison is if those words are also extra. Otherwise, I can say, well, this case is different than that. You can't make that comparison. Mufni means that it's open. Open means that it's extra. That word is extra. If it's extra, then I can't ask any questions on it. Dilay mufni, because if it wasn't open.
Ask a question. Yeah. Often the analogy from Yom Tov to Shabbos is used in the context of a kal v'chomer. Okay. If it's forbidden on Yom Tov, it would be forbidden on Shabbos. Okay, here we have something that's permitted on Yom Tov, and he's using it to say, therefore, it should be permitted on Shabbos.
Yeah.
So
it's not really permitted on Yom Tov. It's what we're doing is, I see what you're saying. We're talking about violating the forbidden labors on Yom Tov as well, because harvesting for both of them is prohibited. And nevertheless, it's permitted for the Omer. So therefore, it's also permitted for the Shtei Alechem. Now, we would be allowed to do it even if the Omer was on Shabbos as well. You would be allowed to do it. And you would be allowed to do it if the Shtei Alechem was on Shabbos as well.
Unless the Gezerah Shava works regardless of whether the logic would work as a Kol V'Chomer.
Yeah, it would work regardless of the logic if it's mufni, if it's open. But here we're learning from Shabbos and Yom Tov together. Because if the Omer is on, if the second day of Pesach is Shabbos, you do the same things. I think, I don't remember the Gemara Menachos, but I think you do it on Shabbos anyway. I think you do it on Shabbos, right? So it would be the same act of pushing it up. So the Gemara now says, I think that's if it's open, then you could learn this. But if it's not open, that means if these words aren't extra, then you have a basic question. The Omer is not just an offering that's brought with any grain that you got in Costco or something. The Omer is offering that you need to actually go and cut the grain. If you have grain that's cut, you have to go cut it again. It has to be cut for the Omer. So those preparations would push off Yom Tov and push off Shabbos. But by the grain for the bread, for the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos, if you have grain that was cut, you already have the grain. So then you don't have to go cut new grain just for this. You could use any grain. So what's the comparison? Why should you say that the Shtei Alechem pushes off Shabbos? It must be that the words are extra. And nevertheless, if you don't have grain, you're allowed to go and cut it. I could only learn that if the words are extra. The Gemara says, Le'i efnei mufnei. I thought Le'i meant to which one is open. Who knows which word is extra. But Rashi says Le'i means that be'emes. Le'i, la'ai. In truth, they are open, these words. Because michti, ksiva ve'esim esayim reish k'tzirchem el hakoyen. It says you should bring the Omer, the first of your harvesting, to the kohen. And then it says b'yom haviyachem. It says b'yom haviyachem lamali. Why does it have to say on the day that you bring it? It already says that you should bring it. Shema min alafnei, it's coming to teach me that word is extra. Vakati mufti mitzad echad, but that's only the Omer has an extra word. V'shaminan le Rabbi Lezer, damar mufti mitzad echad l'meidin mishivin. Rabbi Lezer holds that both words need to be extra. This he learns from Masechta Yevamos. Rashi brings a whole story. The chalitza needs to be done with the right, not with the left. Anyway, in that context, Rabbi Lezer says that both words need to be extra. Otherwise, you can ask questions. And over here, we already know what the question is. That the Omer is very different than the Shtei Alechem. The Pesach offering, the one that's brought on the second day of Pesach, is very different than the one that's brought on Shavuos. So the Gemara answers, Taviyo Ribu Yehu. The Pasuk says that you should bring the new offering, you bring from your dwelling places, you bring the bread that's woven, that's waved, that's not woven, that's waved. So, and then it says taviyu. So that extra taviyu you shall bring, that's extra. So we have extra from both sides. Let's go back. What was Rabbi Yechanan's point? Here Rabbi was saying that it's not everything that Rabbi Eliezer allows, not every mitzvah. Some mitzvahs he won't allow, and I'll prove it to you, because he needs a Gzeir Shava to get permissibility to bring the Shtei Alechem, the preparations of the Shtei Alechem on Shabbos. So the Gemara is going back now to Rabbi Yechanan. What was he coming to exclude? What was he coming to exclude from the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that something is not allowed? What case was he coming to tell me? The Gemara says, L'muti mai. Ilem l'muti lulav. Maybe he's coming to tell me that if a person forgot to cut the lulav off his date palm tree, that you're not allowed to go cut it off on Yom Tov. According to Rabbi Lezer, if you forgot to make a scalpel to do the bris, you're allowed to make it on Yom Tov for Shabbos. But you're not allowed to cut the lulav off, even though you forgot it. Says that can't be the case. For Tanya, we have a brisa. Lulav v'chol machshiv deichenes Shabbos to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer actually holds you're allowed to climb up the tree, cut the lulav down, tie it up, do everything that you need for the. That's Rabbi Lezer's opinion. All preparations. So what was Rabbi Yochanan coming to exclude when he said not every mitzvah? So he says, well, elul muti matzah. To tell me that if you forgot to make matzah and it's Pesach night, that you're allowed to go and grind the flour, heat the oven, make the matzah, and you should have matzah for the Seder, nice and fresh. But Tanya, it can't be that that's what he's coming to exclude, because matzah v'chol mashir deichenes Shabbos to Rabbi Lezer. He says that even if it's Shabbos, you're allowed to go prepare it on Yom Tov and Shabbos, that night. Maybe it's coming to tell me that if you don't have a shofar, you're allowed to cut it off the animal or bring it to Rosh Hashanah and do all those things. He's coming to tell me that you're not allowed to do that. Rabbi Yochanan saying it's only the ismal that you're allowed to prepare, not the shofar. But Tanya shofar v'chol mashir deichenes Shabbos to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer has a lot of exceptions. What is Rabbi Yochanan telling me that is the one that you're not allowed to do? If you forgot to put tzitzis on your four-cornered garment, or you forgot to put the mezuzah on your house, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Tanya Nami Hachi is also a brisa. The Shavin, and they agree, that if you did this on Yom Tov, or you did this on Shabbos, that you're chayiv if you tie tzitzis. My timer. What's the reason why this is left out? Rav Yosef Vishen Kavul Emzman. Very strange question the Gemara has here. My timer. We just had a whole different story. I needed a reason to include it, not a reason to leave it out. Anyway, whatever the case is, I believe that's what Tosfos here is discussing. Whatever the case is, tzitzis and mezuzah are different because there's no set time for them. The other things have a set time. Shofar, matzah, lulav. If I don't do it that day, I don't have another time to do it. But tzitzis I can do afterwards, and mezuzah I can do afterwards. So it doesn't push off Shabbos if you didn't do it. Amalei Abaya Adarabba. Abaya says 1 second. On the contrary, midein kvulam zman, because there's no set time, kol shaita v'shaita zmanihu. That doesn't matter. The fact is that right now is the time, just like tomorrow's the time. It doesn't make it worse. It makes it better. It makes it, or the other way. It doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. I have to do it now as well. Elam Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Yitzchak Vitim, Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yeshua. Hayol biyadei lafkiran. There's different ways of learning this. By the house, it's easier to understand. He doesn't really need to put up the mezuzah right now, because he can be mafkir his house. That means he can make his house ownerless, and you only have to put a mezuzah up on your own house. If it's not your house, then you don't need to put up a mezuzah. Yeah, I read that Houdini would travel around and he carried a tefillin and a mezuzah with him. Every hotel room that he stayed in, he'd put a mezuzah up on the hotel room. I never heard of anyone else that did that. He's not known to be the halachic authority. But if it's not your own house, all over there, maybe it was considered because he was renting. Maybe if you rent a room for more than 30 days, then it's considered yours. Maybe that's the explanation. So what he could do is he can make it ownerless, and then he doesn't need to put up a mezuzah. Talking about should putting up the mezuzah push off Shabbos and Yom Tov? Say no, because he can just make the house ownerless, and then he's exempt from that, so he shouldn't push it up. The problem with this Gemara, with the difficulty with this Gemara, is that I have a much better answer when it comes to tzitzis. The answer is just take it off. You don't need to make it ownerless. The Gemara gave one answer for the house, for the mezuzah, and for the tzitzis. For the tzitzis, I have an answer, just take it off. Well, it could be that really this opinion holds that tzitzis, that garments are chayiv in tzitzis even if you're not wearing it. It's a discussion in the Gemara. We don't hold like that, but it could be this. We're going according to that opinion. And if you make it ownerless, then you don't have to put tzitzis. Then you don't have to put tzitzis on it. Other possibility could be what the Gemara is doing is it's giving me one answer that fits both house and tzitzis. And what it's saying is that even if I'm wearing the tzitzis, even if I'm wearing the garment, I should say, I don't need to put tzitzis on it because it's not mine. It's like a talis she'ula. If you borrow someone's garment that doesn't have tzitzis, you're exempt. But let's say it does have tzitzis. You don't have to. You don't say a bracha on it if it has tzitzis. Talis she'ula. It's supposed to be matana minas la'achzer. It's a gift that you return. Okay. Amar Mar, the master taught, we learned before. Lulav v'chol machshir of deichenes Shabbos, that the lulav and all its preparations push off Shabbos, according to Rabbi Lezer, Div Rabbi Lezer. Minolei Rabbi Lezer, how does Rabbi Lezer know this? That you're allowed to go up, climb the tree, cut the lulav off the date palm to be able to have a lulav in it, and you do that even on Shabbos. So, let's say he's learning it because I'm allowed to harvest the grain for the Omer offering on the second day of Pesach. Or the Shtei Alechem, I'm allowed to harvest the grain for Shavuos. Shekein tzarech kavaya. Sorry, it's not a good comparison. Those are sacrifices. This is not a sacrifice to lulav. How can you compare? Elam Markra, rather he learns it from a special pasuk. It says Bayayim. It says Kachtem lechem Bayayim Rishon, and it says Bayayim afilu b'Shabbos. You take it on the first day, the lulav, and that means even on Shabbos. That's actually how we learn the bris. It says Bayayim Hashmini, Bayayim afilu b'Shabbos. Yeah, that the bris pushes off Shabbos. Rabbi Lezer extends it to even preparations for the bris. He learns that you're allowed to prepare the lulav even on Shabbos. Ulamai hilchasa. What are you allowed to do on Shabbos with the lulav? Eily milatiltil. It doesn't want to tell you that you're allowed to carry it. Why does it say bayayim? It's coming to tell me that the lulav pushes off Shabbos. What does it push off? That I'm allowed to move the lulav? I'm allowed to lift it up. Maybe it's muktzah. It's shechkral mishrei tiltil. 1 second. Historically, this doesn't work. The laws of muktzah were introduced to the tradition and at the beginning of the Second Temple. The Torah doesn't have to tell me, exempt me from laws of muktzah. It says, Bayayim, you're even allowed to take it on Shabbos. From the Torah's perspective, from that time, it was permissible even there was no prohibition. Ela lamachshirav, it must be talking about that you're cutting it off. You're preparing the lulav. That's what it's coming to allow us. It's giving you the permissibility to cut the lulav off the tree, even on Shabbos. For Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do? It says that you're allowed. They say that Bayayim tells me something important. It tells me that you shake the lulav by day, you don't shake it at night. Rabbi Lezer Bayayim v'lei b'layla minalei. Where does Rabbi Lezer know that you shake the lulav by day, not at night? The pasuk says that you shall rejoice in front of Hashem for 7 days. That's where we know that you take the lulav for 7 days in the temple. 1 day outside the temple, 7 days in the temple. We do it all 7 days as a commemoration for the temple. But it says 7 days, you take it in the temple. Yamim v'lei leilas. It says 7 days. That means by day, not by night. So that's where he knows that the lulav is taken by day. The Rabbanan, they have an extra pasuk. I can learn from that pasuk. What about the bayayim? So Yitzchak. Rabbanan say no, it's necessary. Shivas Yamim doesn't tell me that it's only by day. Shivas Yamim could mean day and night. Why? Because by Sukkah it says that Shivas Yamim Chag Sukkos Shivas Yamim, whatever the pasuk says. Sukkah is for a holiday for 7 days. Is that I only sit in the sukkah by day? No, day doesn't mean 12 hours. Day means 24 hours. So I would have said the same thing by you rejoice in front of Hashem, 24 hours, which is the lulav. You could do it at night. So Kamash Malan, I need Bayayim to tell me that it's by day. So that's where the argument between the Rabbanan and the Rebbe Lezer is. Maybe the lulav would be enough to teach us all the other halachas of the Shtei Alechem and the Aimer, that the preparations for it should push off Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, Mishum de'ika mifrach. No, lulav is different. Because you can ask a question that Ma lulav shkeintan arba minim. Lulav has certain things that go along with it. And so therefore, it's very necessary for this, that the lulav is there, because I can't do any mitzvah. I can't do the mitzvah if I don't have the lulav there. Taisus discusses that the Shtei Alechem also has things that go along with it. And the Aimer has things that go along with it. The only thing is that the things that go along with the lulav all become one mitzvah. The things that go along with the Shtei Alechem are separate mitzvahs. So this one mitzvah is more significant. It has these other items that go with it. The preparations of this push off Shabbos. I wouldn't have known the other ones if I didn't have verses for them. Sukkah v'chol machshira deichnes Shabbos. The sukkah pushes off Shabbos if I don't prepare a sukkah. Div Rabbi Lezer, that's the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer, how do you know that? It's a little bit of a problem. Rabbi Lezer, I thought, held that you're not allowed to build a sukkah on Yom Tov. It needs to be for 7 days. Maybe, I think Rabbi Lezer agrees that if a child became bar mitzvah, or if someone converted on sukkahs, that he's then allowed to go and build it. I'm not sure exactly. Whatever the case is, he says that the preparations for the sukkah also push off. Where does he know this from? Does he learn it from those two offerings? No, those are sacrifices. You can't learn from there to the sukkah. Sukkah is just a personal thing that you have at home. Imi lulav. Well, lulav is personal. No, shekein tan arba minim. That goes along with 4 items. The myrtle and the citron and the willow. Elagamar shivas yamim lulav. He learns it from shivas yamim. By lulav it says usmachtam ufnei Hashem lekechem shivas yamim. Ma'alahala machshin deichnes Shabbos. Afkanam machshin deichnes Shabbos. We never went back to discuss what does Rabbi Eliezer do with the shivas yamim. He said that shivas yamim of the lulav tells me that you do it by day. But shivas yamim by sukkah, what is that? What does that tell me? Because that's by night. So now we're saying that's telling me that it pushes off Shabbos. I learned it from the shivas yamim of lulav. Afkanam machshiv deichnes Shabbos. The Gemara says, okay, well, maybe sukkah can teach me to everywhere else. I'll just say it by sukkah that the preparations push off Shabbos. I'll learn from everywhere else. Sukkah is very unique. Sukkah is a 24-hour day. You can't learn to anything else. Matzah v'chol mashra deichnes Shabbos. What about the matzah? Rabbi Lezer holds that you're allowed to prepare the matzah on Shabbos even if you didn't prepare it beforehand. How do you know you're allowed to do those preparations? Matzah pushes off Shabbos. If you're going to learn from those two sacrifices matzah is something you just eat at home. Imi lulav, if it's from the lulav, no, lulav is unique. Shekein ta'an arba minim. It has 4 things that go with it, 3 things that go with it, with a total of 4. Imi sukkah shekein neges b'leilos kabiyam. You can't learn from sukkah either. So elagamar chamisha asa michag sukkahs. By sukkahs it says on the 15th day. It's a holiday. By matzah it says on the 15th day. That 15 is a comparison, is an analogy that tells me that something that applies to sukkah applies to matzah. The Gemara learns it the other way. The Gemara says that something that applies to matzah, to Pesach applies to sukkahs, that I'm obligated to sit in the sukkah on the first night of Pesach. It's called yeah, now we're doing it the other way. From sukkah, it goes over to matzah. Shabbos. Just like by sukkah, the preparations for the sukkah push off Shabbos, according to Rabbi Eliezer. So too here. Maybe matzah could teach me to everywhere else, and I don't need any other verses. Very unique. So far, matzah is the only one that applies to women. Why does matzah apply to women? It's a positive command. On this evening, you should eat matzahs. That's time-bound. Women aren't obligated in any mitzvahs that are, any positive commands that are time-bound. The answer is because there's a comparison matzah to chametz. And anyone that's prohibited to eat chametz also has the obligation to eat matzah. And because women are obligated in negative commands, you shall not eat chametz, so then they become obligated in the matzah. Okay, we'll leave it over here.